I'm going to get started. And first, I should introduce myself. My name is Jerry, and I'm a career coach here at Career Services. And so I'm going to go into the next slide, and we're going to talk primarily about CRM job search strategies. And we're going to do a Q&A. And so next slide is going to be with introducing our instructors. So today we have the privilege of having Lavina Keswani here, who's a CRM instructor with Calbright College, and also Matt Brinkerhoff, who is a Salesforce Administrator with Calbright College. So I will give Lavina and Matt this opportunity to address the couple of questions that we have on here. And let me know if you want me to undo the presentation mode. I can do that too. So, but Matt and Lavina, please do introduce yourself and tell us all about how you got involved in Salesforce.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for a very nice introduction. Hello, everyone. This is Lavina. Talking about myself, I have close to 9 years of experience in Salesforce. I have been working entirely on the admin side, development side, being a technical architect on some of the roles, working as an instructor as well at the same time, just making sure that I am able to help people grow in Salesforce. So I myself have grown myself individually. I took help from a lot of people in order for me to grow in Salesforce. That's why my motive is right now just to make sure that I am helping others as well in order for them to grow in Salesforce. So with the first question, how did you choose your career in Salesforce? So talking about my career path here, I started working as a quality assurance analyst. Working as a QA helped me understand how the software works, how the software functional flow works. But down the line, when I was just working continuously, being a quality insurance on a particular software, I realized that I need to grow myself. I need to be able to do more than what I'm doing right now. Testing is definitely a good area, but that is something that was not making me happy. So I started working on one of the product that is a Salesforce, where I was testing the application, and I found myself very, very happy while I was working on Salesforce. And that time I was intrigued to know what and how it is working in the backend. That's when I took help from some of my friends to move into Salesforce development, where I learned some of the admin parts of it. And then you have great Salesforce. I mean, you must have seen that we have great Salesforce trailhead helps that you can grow yourself into. You can learn Salesforce from scratch. Even if you don't know anything about Salesforce, you have the capability of learning it from scratch to the advanced level. So that's how I grew my career. And when I started working on Salesforce product and then moving further, I realized that yes, this is the path where I want to proceed further and learn Salesforce and grow in Salesforce, because that was my happy place, I'll say. All right, so Matt, you want to continue about your journey here?
Definitely. Thank you for the introduction, Jerry and Lavina. Appreciate the insight there. My name is Matt Brinkerhoff. I am the Salesforce Administrator here at Calbright College. I may have met a few of you either through tutoring sessions or Slack engagements, and I'm happy to talk a little about my career path on the Salesforce side. So my professional career, I started off as a salesperson. I was an SDR, sales development representative, and I had used the Salesforce product or platform to keep track of my deals, understand the correspondence I had with my prospects, people I was trying to sell to or get meetings with. And as I moved up the line in the sales world, where I was an SDR manager and then an account executive where I carried a quota, I sort of noticed that there were better ways to use Salesforce in order to be successful for the salespeople primarily. And I had spoken to the Salesforce administrator at the tech companies that I had worked at, and I really liked what they were doing for their job. I found it appealing that they got to make changes within Salesforce in order to help their coworkers and colleagues improve their workflow and basically do a better job and be more successful. I found a lot of value in helping people be more productive by using the Salesforce software. And so after being a sales rep for about 6 years and using Salesforce, I realized that I wanted to make a transition into operating the Salesforce example instead of just using it to track my deals. And I had gone to Trailhead on my own and I did a ton of internet research to figure out what the best modules and paths to take to study up and what vocabulary words I needed to learn, what terminology was important. And I was lucky enough, Lavina mentioned she had some friends in the Salesforce world. I was lucky enough to have a friend who wrote one of the Salesforce for Dummies books, the black, yellow, and white ones that you see at the bookstores that have a bunch of different topics. And he sort of gave me a little bit of insight into what the job was like on a day-to-day basis, and also helped me understand a few of the concepts that were in the Salesforce Administrator exam to get your certification that I was having some trouble with. And it sort of reassured my belief that being a Salesforce admin gave the ability to help improve your colleagues' productivity. And selfishly, it had a lot more stability than being a sales rep, where you are essentially tied to a quota and are a little bit more expendable than the Salesforce admin. So that was the path that I took to get here. Was I used Salesforce as an end user. I was a salesperson. I liked what it did and I thought it could do more. And then I sort of did my own learning through Trailhead and took the exam, passed it, and realized that, yes, this is what I want to do. So that was sort of my career path to get into Salesforce.
Thank you so much, Lavina, Matt. That was an awesome introduction. And so we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about gaining experience. So why do you think gaining experience is important in landing a job? And how did you gain experience? And what is one resource or strategy that you would recommend for students about gaining experience?
If I may start, Jerry, here, gaining experience when I was learning Salesforce, I remember I was working as a tester where I was just seeing the functional side of it. So when I knew that if functionality is working, I was intrigued to know how the backend is working. So how I started about is when you go through Trailhead, you get the experience of going through some of the challenges. One of the practical experience that always helped me not to blindly just follow the challenge, maybe just work through more around it. So when challenge is asking you to perform step number 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe try and extend it to a level where you can gain some more knowledge around it. Or when you're going through the Trailhead challenges, you perform the challenge once. Sometimes what happens is when you perform the challenge only once, you don't grab the minute details while you're performing those steps. Maybe if you perform those challenge maybe once or twice or extend it in some way, that usually helps. And another thing that helped me, on internet, you will find lots of challenges. When I say lots of challenges, lot of good practical experiences people have shared. So for example, if you're trying to create an object in Salesforce, you can try to create relationship in Salesforce. I might be going in details here on the Salesforce technical side, but just to give you a brief background about it, try and get some examples from your friends, from social media, from YouTube, from other places, and get more involved while you're working on it. Practical experience is something which will make you so confident that wherever you are going, you can talk about it. You can express each and every challenge that you face, and with those challenges that you will be facing, you will gain more experience, because the more challenges you face, the more Google you will do, the more you will read, and the more practical experience you will gain from there. I'll take a pause here. I'm sure Matt has some good experience to share here. Matt, you want to continue?
Definitely. Thank you for starting us off, Lavina. I appreciate it. So I could talk a little about gaining experience to land a job, and I will also focus on some of the resources and strategies I use to get to the position that I'm in. So to sort of piggyback on what Lavina said about gaining experience, unless you are in a company that already has a Salesforce admin role that's opening up and you're making a move within the same company, it'll be pretty tough to get a professional job offer without working on Trailhead or doing super badges or working in Trailhead itself. So what I did was I focused on my Trailhead and did as many challenges, as many super badges, as many badges as I could in different areas, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be using the sales cloud, the sales side, or if I was going to be using CPQ, which is the quoting tool, or if I was going to be working with marketing and campaigns. So I tried to touch on every sort of area within the Salesforce world on Trailhead. And how I got some professional experience after passing the certification exam, and we'll talk more about it later on in this presentation, was to volunteer. And I had the ability to take on projects for nonprofits or smaller organizations that did not have a Salesforce administrator. Some of the projects that I worked on in the volunteering world was to do some data imports and upload. So like one of the volunteer organizations I worked at, they just bought Salesforce and they were storing all their data in Excel prior to that. And they needed to upload the data from Excel spreadsheets into Salesforce itself. So that gave me some hands-on real experience as to what the job would look like once I got a paid professional role. And it allowed me to present to people I was interviewing with that I had real life project experience. So I'd highly recommend volunteering to an organization, and we will go into that in a bit more detail later on in the session. So I can speak to the volunteer world here, since this is sort of how I got my first true admin professional experience. And there's a variety of search engines or organizations where they where a nonprofit or a small company can post a project that they need help with, where they say something like, hey, we just bought Salesforce, we need to do a data import, or we have Salesforce, we need some training. Can you show us how to use it? And can you sort of review our setup and make recommendations as to how we can improve it? And I leveraged Catchafire primarily. I also use Taproot. And to reiterate, the organizations that need help will post a project on there, and you sort of raise your hand, reach out to them, say, hey, I would like to help you with this project. This is why I would like to do it, or this is something I've done that's similar to it, where I know I can help out. And then you speak to them and you sort of get brought in to work on that project with them. Some projects last longer than others. Some are more labor intensive than others. It really just depends on what the organization needs. So I was lucky enough to help out. And what's also nice about it is you can work for nonprofits all over the United States, not just where you're geographically located. So I was able to work with a children's institute in Rochester, New York, as well as an art institute based in Dallas. And then for people in the Bay Area, the San Mateo County nonprofit group also had a project for me to volunteer at and give them some help. So I would highly recommend that you use these volunteer search engines to find Salesforce related projects that you can reach out about and hopefully get some professional experience helping them. And let's say you do a great job, everything goes well and they have headcount and they need to hire someone, then you've already shown that you can do the job and you would be a good fit. So there's a number of benefits to volunteering. Not only do you get the professional hands-on experience as to how to do the Salesforce setup, and it also gives you the ability to boost your resume to say, hey, I've done A, B, and C. I set up reports and dashboards for this organization. So it's definitely a benefit to volunteer prior to interviewing. It's not a requirement, but I think it is highly recommended.
That was great. Thank you so much, Matt. And so we're going to transition now to networking. And we don't necessarily have to go with the script, but we just want to, if you can highlight a little bit about your networking experience. Why do you think networking is important? Maybe examples of how you networked for your position, and any type of resources that you might think of that might be helpful for our students as well.
Sure, Jerry. So firstly, I would like to just a quick explanation of how networking will help you develop and improve your skill set. So basically, there are different types of ways where you can actually network with people. What is the importance of networking is the basic scenario. So for example, when you're talking to people, you're sharing your beats, you are telling them that this is the problem that you're facing. That helps them to talk to you, understand your problem, and maybe sometimes they can actually help you out in some of the solution. So how to become effective at networking? So first thing is look at the right people. Your career network should include at least one person who can help you grow professionally. It can be your past and present co-workers, maybe bosses, friends with similar interests, maybe any colleagues from the business associations, or anyone whom you're working with or talking to. Another thing is whenever you are networking, you have to be very proactive. So you need to understand that you need to cultivate that relationship in a way that if someone helped you out at some point of time, you need to show your willingness to understand their needs as well at the time when they need you. So it's two-way side. It's a two-way door that needs to be open every time whenever you're getting into the networking side. Keep a track of your network, whether you can connect to someone where you can get in touch electronically in case if you have the capability of going out and meeting people face to face. That's a very good idea. But in case if you can't do that electronically, dropping them a note or maybe a mail, that's a good idea to connect with each other to understand what the other person is doing and what how you can take their help in case at any point of time you need them. Seek out for networking events. Currently, Salesforce has huge number of Salesforce events. There are different meetups which are happening virtually and physically. Even if you don't know anything about Salesforce, even if you're just getting started into Salesforce, anything at even if you're there at level 1 in Salesforce or level 10 in Salesforce, that meetup is available for anyone and everyone who would like to join. Just sign up for those events, meet them virtually, understand what they are doing, maybe talk to them about Salesforce. You will get some good ideas from there. Even if you're facing some challenges, you can talk to them in those meetups. They can help you out. There are some sessions where they can help you out with the new products that they're coming with. So when you're working in Salesforce, those new products usually help you out in to make sure that you grow in Salesforce. So for example, if you're working in Sales Cloud and you want to understand more about Service Cloud, these are the different domains in Salesforce. So in order to learn how to grow yourself in Service Cloud, so you can attend one of the virtual meetup or maybe physical meetup, which is happening. It's a great way of talking to people, understanding what are the pros and cons of those technologies that you're getting into. So that is one way I will suggest that you can go. Another way to help or to get help virtually from people in through networking, there are different Salesforce communities. There are different Trailhead communities that you can join. You can read through the questions. You can answer them. If you know something, you can answer those questions. People will like your answers. That will give you motivation or confidence that you are going in the right path. Or for example, if you're stuck somewhere, you need to know something, post your question over there. People will come and respond back over there. People are really, really proactive in responding. So you will get the responses maybe in an hour, or at least maybe in 24 hours, you will get the response. Someone will definitely respond back to your questions and you will get your problem solved. So Getting into Salesforce, this is the basic and the best thing which can happen to anyone, that you get into the community, you go for meetups. Even if you don't want to go to for physical meetups, you can sign up for virtual meetups. Salesforce has all these even lined up. You can plan as per your availability. It's not that you have to specifically go on this date. They have several meetups, especially virtually. So you can sign up for any location and they would be happy to help you. Another thing is, when you go to these meetups, there are some goodies, I'll say, or maybe swag, I'll say. Salesforce is really proactive in sending those. It's not big enough, but yeah, it's a good way to keep yourself motivated that you got the swag. Or maybe sometimes if you get into the challenge and you complete the challenge, you do get 200 or $400 vouchers as well for certification. So this way you can get into those meetups, start right now in case if you want to. You can get through it without any problem. Or in case if you have any problem, reach out to any of the instructor. We will help you or guide you how to get into those.
Thank you, Lavina.
Awesome. Yeah. So I can speak to a little bit about my experience in the networking world and, excuse me, what resources I leveraged. Lavina made a great point about the Salesforce meetups or the user groups. They have, not only do they have region, so this is all through like Trailhead and Trailblazer community, which is where you're doing your coursework. There are user groups based on verticals, like what type of industry the company is in, or they're regional based. So for example, I'm in the Bay Area and there's a San Francisco one, a San Jose one, a San Ramon one, a San Mateo one. So I would just sign up for each meeting that was in the area, and they are all on different days of the week. Some of them are during business hours, some of them are after hours. And it's a way to meet with other professionals that are doing the same similar job responsibilities as you. And sometimes they would have a presenter from another technology come in and say how they were using Salesforce. So it's a great way to at least meet names and get some experience asking them questions on how they do their job. I also did a Salesforce career fair for entry level or new Salesforce administrators. I believe once you get your certification, you are eligible to do a career fair that is organized by Salesforce, where they have their partners that are looking for Salesforce admins. I did a virtual one. I think this was in, I want to say January of this year, where they have 10, 20, 30, I forgot how many companies, but a bunch of different regional consulting agencies that needed to hire Salesforce consultants, administrators, et cetera. And you got to meet people at the company, where it could be an interview where they sort of ask you, hey, what's your experience? What do you know about us? Or it could be hey, this is what our company does. At the minimum, you get to put a face to the name and you can share your resume with them there. You could set up an interview if you have a good conversation with them. So I would definitely recommend leveraging that resource when it comes about. There's also the Trailhead Trailblazer community, which is sort of a forum of Salesforce professionals. Some of them are like we were, where we are just getting started and we were trying to get a job in the world. Some of them are actual employees of Salesforce, and some of them work for all the different companies in the world as their Salesforce admins. And it's a way to sort of share ideas on how to solve problems. And everyone is extremely helpful. No one really keeps information siloed. They are very willing to offer advice on how to solve a Salesforce problem, as well as what type of companies to apply for. And so another resource I used a little bit less, but if anyone is familiar with Reddit, they have a Salesforce careers subreddit. I believe that's the name of it, Salesforce careers or Salesforce jobs, where they post job listings for Salesforce positions. And it's also another community for Salesforce administrators to collaborate with each other. And then the other part I would talk about with friends and family is if you happen to know someone at a company who has an opening for a Salesforce administrator, I would start with people you know first, and then work your way down to applying to places that don't know you specifically. So those are all three of the resources that I would recommend using to build your admin network.
That's a great summary. Thank you so much. And next, we're going to talk about the resume. So we work quite a bit with students and career services on revamping their resume. But maybe if you can talk a little bit more about why is a targeted resume important? How can students tailor their resume for a CRM or Salesforce position? And what strategies do you think that they can employ to better market their skills?
So, targeted resume, why is it important? First and foremost answer is when you are applying for a job, when someone sees your resume, they need to see how much knowledge you have in Salesforce. So targeted resume comes there. You definitely come from a different background. I myself came from a different background. I was not there in Salesforce at all. But then I still need to show how much experience do I have in Salesforce, because the other person who is sitting right across that table needs to know how much I know in Salesforce. So you definitely need to write down what experience or exposure you have in your past experience, but you need to make them see how much experience you have in Salesforce. So basically, targeted resume helps to highlight the skills and experience relevant to that position. So when you're working with Salesforce, you can probably define in the description, maybe let's say you define a proper description of what you have worked in Salesforce. Like you have worked with process builders, you have worked with the different flows, you have worked with different objects, object relationship management, you have worked with all these different things, or maybe you're working as an admin. So those roles and responsibilities, if you try and highlight them more in your resume, will talk through whenever someone is reading your resume. It helps them to match the job description in order to identify whether you are fit for the position or not. So your resume speaks before you get started with it. Salesforce has provided a trailhead, and which has been added to IT 520 as well, where they will tell you the strategies how to write the resume for Salesforce. So take help of that. And we as an instructor, we are also available. I'm sure Jerry and the team is also available for letting you help or helping you in learning or maybe identifying what are the best use cases you can talk through the interview. But before that, just try and understand what you have performed and try to define those roles and responsibilities. If you have done any volunteer work or if you have done any challenge, you can define that in your Salesforce resume too. I think Matt has another example that he would like to add.
Definitely. Thanks for covering almost everything, Lavina. I appreciate it. What I wanted to focus on for the resume tailoring strategies is the buzzwords portion of it. There's a couple benefits to that. One of them, and I'll talk about what you can use. One of the benefits to using buzzwords essentially is that you can list the different technologies or products that you have worked with, as well as the different parts of Salesforce that you have done. And that's important because when a recruiter, let's say you put your resume on a job board site or you submit it to a company, like you apply, typically the recruiter or the person in HR who's involved with hiring will do a keyword search or look up the different words that they are looking for. So like, let's say a company needs help with flow builder, or they need help on their approval processes or territory management, for example. If you have that listed on your resume, then it stands out that you have the experience that they're looking for. So I'd recommend using a variety of buzzwords and keywords such as process builder, approval processes, dashboards, report builder, any part of Salesforce that you worked on. That way you can get your resume a little bit more visible, and it highlights the different pieces that you worked on. That way, when a hiring manager or the recruiter is looking at your resume, they can get an idea of what you've done without having to ask you. They will definitely ask you about what you did, but it sort of accelerates the process and like gives you a better chance of getting a callback or a response saying, hey, I want to talk to you, if you are using terminology. So I would definitely recommend putting that on your resume. I have a section where I list all the different parts of Salesforce that I've worked on and also the different technologies that I've used. So that's what I would recommend.
That's great. Thank you. And our last topic of the evening is interviewing. What should students expect from a CRM interview or Salesforce administration interview? Is it panel, behavioral questions, scenarios? How did you prepare for your Salesforce administrator interview? And what are some resources and strategies that you have for our students this evening?
Thanks, Jerry. First thing that I would like to highlight here is that there are 3.3 million jobs which are expected in Salesforce ecosystem by 2022. And more than 200K companies, they have switched to Salesforce. Considering this data, we have lot more jobs which are coming in the market, and I'm sure there might be too much of competition too. But how to prepare for the best of it? How to start with when you're working in Salesforce? When you are learning Salesforce, the best part of it is write down notes. When I say write down notes, you're just jotting down all the main points so that whenever you are preparing for the interview, just before the interview, you have learned everything. You can just skim through all the notes that you have. Those might be pointers, but those pointers will help you to prepare during the interview. And when you're going in the interview, you can talk through them. You can remember those points one more time, and then you can talk through them. There are tons of Salesforce interview questions which are available for the admin level. What are the basic questions which are asked for the beginners, or maybe the experienced folks, or maybe an admin folks? So in order to identify how to prepare for that, notes is the first option. Second option is go through those websites. There are some mock interview questions which you can answer. You can select those options, and on the basis of which you can talk through them. The next option is we have certain documents available. We can share those, and maybe you can prepare from those question and answers. Those are pretty straightforward, basic questions. What are workflows? What are process builder? What are flows? Beginner interview starts with that. You need to understand the role-based scenarios. So challenges that you have performed, make sure you're performing them well, because that will help you to answer those interview questions which are scenario based questions. So if there is a question which are scenario based question, performing those challenges with an open mind will help you to answer those questions immediately without any problem. Another option is there is a Salesforce trailhead itself for the interview questions, which can help you to grow and learn from there. Then you have Salesforce community. There are certain sessions, there are certain YouTube videos which actually prepare you for those interview questions which are asked with the beginners or maybe Salesforce admin experienced person. Moving on, when you grow in Salesforce, how you get through those interviews is to prepare for your past interviews. So for example, you went for an interview. Once you come back, what I'll suggest is just write down all the questions on a booklet, or maybe a place where you can go back and see those answers. That is one thing which helps everyone to go back, see those questions, and then revise them quickly. Because whenever I am going for the next company or the next interview, I know those questions would be there in my interview. So having them noted and keeping the answers ready, and just before the interview, you can brush through those skills, and you can just be ready to answer those interview questions. Another thing, talking about the behavioral questions. When we talk about behavioral questions, they ask you different scenarios that they want to test how proactive you are in front of the client, how good your decision making is. So, with those questions, taking examples of your previous work experience, I'll suggest try and talk in terms of Salesforce as well. So, for example, if someone is asking you, if client is not ready or not listening, or if the client is asking for something which Salesforce cannot deliver, how you will try to convince the client. Such behavioral questions, they want to judge your decision making capability, or maybe they want to judge your team building capability. Understanding those behavioral questions, try to put your best hand forward, because they want to understand how you can perform in those scenarios. Another thing that can happen is they want to understand how well you can work in a stressful scenarios. There are certain scenarios I won't lie about it. There are certain situations where you have to work under stress. So they want to evaluate whether you can work under stress or not. So these are different questions that you can expect that an interview can ask you. So be prepared to answer with the best scenario case. So we call it as a star method, where you're talking about a situation, you're telling them a scenario where you have already solved that problem, and then you're trying to explain them the same problem. Then you have problem solving scenarios. Again, the same thing. You have already evolved from those scenarios, and then you're talking through the same situations, or you're explaining them the same situation. So rather than giving the straightforward answer, if you tell them that you have experienced that in past and that is how you have evolved, that will give them more confidence in you. That will tell them that your story is valid. Your story is you come from a pretty great background or a great experience, that you can talk through about the experiences. So experience is something, or case study is something, if you try to explain them, that will give them more confidence in your capabilities.
Awesome.
That's it from my side. Yeah.
Cool. I can add a few points to that. That was a great in detailed approach to the interview process and how to prepare yourself. So I can talk a little bit about the macro high level way I sort of prepped for interviews. So one of the best practices I recommend is, if you are looking at the job posting, they typically list what type of skill sets or requirements that will be helpful for that person to have in the job. So example, like they might post that they have a big use of reporting and dashboards. So I would note that and make sure to talk about my experience with reports and dashboards when it gets to the interview. Or if they say something like, we need someone who has CPQ experience, which is the quoting tool, then I would talk about what I've done in that realm. That way you're not showing up and saying that you've done work in Salesforce that is not necessarily relevant to their environment. It's sort of like a heads up or a cheat sheet as to what they do in Salesforce, so you can explain what you know about Salesforce in that area. And another thing that they typically ask you in the Salesforce admin interviews is to explain, this is sort of reiterating what Lavina said, but they will ask you to explain a certain project that you participated in or set up and why you did it, what the benefits were. So I would come ready with a couple of scenarios that you could speak on, like saying that I'm just using my own experience, for example, like when I was interviewing for Calbright, they presented a scenario about setting up a case management system and how you would go about that. So I prepared myself to talk about what I had done and what I would do for setting up case management or a ticketing system. So those are a couple points that I would focus on for the interview itself. In terms of like resources, like Lavina said, there's a good amount of online resources. One website I recommend is salesforceben.com. That's BEN as in Nancy. They have some interview questions. Again, it's a very comprehensive list where, if they have 100 questions on that list, you're not going to get asked all 100, but gives you an idea of what to expect. So you're not surprised by any questions. So another thing that I would prep for, and this is more applicable to any type of job, but also for Salesforce administrators, is to check out the people that you are, if you can identify or if you know who is going to be interviewing you, you can go on LinkedIn and check out their LinkedIn profile to see what they do for the company, where they've worked at in the past, and try to find some common ground. Maybe you two have a friend who worked at the same company that that you may not have worked with at the same time, but they know so-and-so. Maybe they have a LinkedIn connection, and they also will potentially share what they do at that job. So you can say, oh, I noticed that you are responsible for managing all the integrations with Salesforce. Cool. Well, I have experience doing this type of integration. Or what do you think the biggest challenge was with integrating different technologies? That way you show that you're kind of curious and that you sort of respect or are a fan of the type of work they did. So those are some interview tips and tricks that I would recommend to everyone.
That's incredible. And believe it or not, we're at the last slide of questions. So I'm going to open this up to any of our audience members and students. Do you have any questions that you have for Matt or Lavina? You can post them in the chat if you prefer, or you can also just unmute and ask as well. Let's see, so it's looking pretty quiet. There was a question in chat a while ago, and it said, Matt, how long were your projects when you worked at the different places in gaining experience?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. So depending on the organization, it ranged from about 1 month of engagement where we met a few times a week for 30 minutes or an hour. Sometimes we would meet, talk about what we're doing, and then I would work on the updates on my own. And then we would have another meeting to say, hey, this is what I've done. This is what it looks like. Does this sort of help you solve the problem you had? Or is this the type of project resolution that you were looking for? Some of them, it all depends on how often they can meet. Typically they have low bandwidth and you're not going to be meeting with them all the time, but you could still have enough work on your own time outside of meeting with them that would take up more time. So I think the longest I had a project was ongoing for about 3 months, but it's not 8 to 5 every hour. It was, we meet once or twice a week. This is what I've done. This is what we need to do, et cetera. So you can also work for multiple, nonprofits or volunteer at the same time, which is what I did, because it's not a full, you're not getting, you're not working full time for either of them. You could have multiple projects going on at once. And that way you're getting experience in 3 or 4 different aspects of Salesforce at the same time. I would try to do that where you have 2 or 3 projects that you're working on for different nonprofits at the same time versus working for one at a time. This way you sort of accelerate your experience and also give yourself a better chance to get a job interview and get hired.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for expanding on that. And so I think that, Lavina, do you have any last thoughts or any tidbits that you would like to share with our students before we close up tonight?
Yeah, we are just one last update from my side. We are coming up with the Trailhead optional option where there will be more extensive modules. It's not mandatory that you have to perform for your course to be completed, but those are optional in case if you're done early or if you want to learn more on Salesforce, get yourself more practical experience. So those challenges are pretty good. Once we share, I think if anyone can go ahead and perform those challenges, and that will help them to grow more in Salesforce and learn more in Salesforce through those modules.
Well, this has been a fabulous evening spending with the 2 of you and all our students. I really appreciate Lavina and Matt for being here. So big round of applause to all the information and tidbits that you provided us this evening.